check out this chunky little morsel. This is a black cricket, one of the best autumn patterns of all time. Here's how you tie it. I like to use streamer hooks when tying terrestrial patterns. This particular hook, a B10S Stinger, has a fairly wide gape and a thin profile. This is a size 8. Before we get our hook set in the vise, I'm going to grab a piece of black Larva Lace foam, tear one section from the end, and then trim it about halfway on the slice. That should be about all the foam you need, and then some. We're going to end up folding this foam in half on the back side of the hook shank. The rearward facing portion of foam is going to come over the top. And I only want that extending to just before the hook eye. So I usually measure mine out ahead of time to make sure I'm about in that location. Stick the hook point into the center of the foam and thread that foam up onto the hook shank. You can bring it all the way up to behind the eye and then place your hook in the vise for tying to commence. Start by getting a base of 70 denier ultra thread started on the hook shank and bring thread wraps all the way back to the bend of the hook. I'm going to grab some black super floss. I'm going to make some legs. So I'm going to take one long piece of super floss, fold it in half, and then trim it so I have 2 equal portions. Now each of those sections is going to be folded in half as well. And then I'm going to knot them near the center. You're going to do this by tying an overhand knot with the doubled over super floss. So twist the 2 pieces together to form a small loop in the middle. And then I always try to bring the loop end through. And once you get it through, just pull it tight and make sure your knot is tight on the center. There's going to be 2 different tag ends. One is going to be facing downward and the other is going to kind of veer upward. I'm always going to trim that upward veering leg portion right at the knot. You can trim the remainder of the leg section as well. Bring your thread all the way back to the bend of the hook where you're going to tie in that spare section of super floss that you trimmed from the leg material. This is going to represent the forked tail of the cricket. I'm going to capture one side of this super floss on the near side of the hook. Make sure it's secure with multiple thread wraps before folding the rest of the material over to the opposite side of the hook shank and capture it in a similar fashion. Once I get my super floss tail tied in, I'm going to throw a couple of half hitches and then snip my thread. Now we can bring that foam back over the super floss tail portion near the bend of the hook. Get your thread started again just behind the hook eye and bring it back all the way to in front of the foam. So this next step is not only to give the body a little bit of shimmer in between the foam pieces, but it's also to create a good anchor point for those foam pieces to sit together. So I'm going to dub a noodle of Firestar dubbing onto the thread and place a little line of super glue on the hook shank before bringing my noodle of Firestar dubbing forward to create a underbody for this cricket. This underbody is going to be covered by 2 pieces of foam and smashed together with some super glue, so it doesn't have to be fancy. Just make sure you include enough Firestar to brush it out a little bit on either side so that it shows a little bit in between the foam pieces. When you get to the 3/4 point of the hook shank, it's time to add a little bit of super glue to these foam pieces. So I can use the gel control just to make sure it doesn't run everywhere. And I'm going to put a line of gel control on the top portion of the foam, as well as the underside portion of the foam, making sure it's positioned correctly on the hook shank before bringing those 2 pieces of foam together and giving them a little tight squeeze with your fingers, while at the same time using your thread at the 3/4 point to make a few strong wraps of thread to hold the foam in place. You can trim your tail to length. I always cut mine a little bit shorter. Next, we're going to tie in those rear legs that we worked on in the beginning, a very distinguishable characteristic of this bug. One leg at a time, bring them to the side of the cricket body. and capture it down so that the rear legs extend to or beyond the cricket's tail. It's okay to have a little bit longer legs, I think, on these cricket patterns because they are such a prominent feature on the bug. Don't trim the excess super floss loop on the front side of the hook after you capture that leg in. You're going to use those as the front legs of the cricket later on in the process. Just leave those little loops hanging out the front side of the fly on either side. Grab the other leg, and with 3 or 4 wraps, capture it down on the opposite side of the hook shank. Maneuver the legs to make sure that it's oriented properly on the hook and make sure it's angled properly. You don't want one leg kicking up and one leg kicking to the side. Both kind of oriented in a downward position or off to the side a little bit. It's not always easy with super floss, but do your best to maneuver it and get it situated properly. After you get these legs tied in, I like to try and advance my thread forward a little bit, capturing down the foam and moving my thread forward towards the eye of the hook to kind of push those legs forward a little bit and to make a small space to where I can tie in some more materials next. For an underwing, I'm going to use black polybear. Polybear is a great material for this because it shimmers nicely. It also doesn't absorb water, so it won't weigh down this fly after you catch a few fish. It's really easy to dry out. I'm going to take a small clump from the hank. It only needs to be 1.5 inches or 2 inches long or so. I'm going to capture it down at its midpoint on top of the cricket and then fold the remaining material rearward so that both sections are hanging off the back of the fly. Don't worry too much about getting it to lay flat yet. That will be made much easier once we bring the foam over the top. Next, I'm going to add another section of my favorite Firestar dubbing color, Peacock, just to cover up those thread wraps and to make a nice little thorax transition piece on this cricket. Make a small noodle of dubbing on your thread and just make a few wraps in that same location. This will help push the legs forward a little bit more, and it'll also help lay that polybear rearward. Next, we're going to bring our bottom section of foam over the top. And to do that, use a bodkin to poke a hole through the foam just in front of the hook eye. Once you fold the foam over the top and have the hook eye poked through, you can push that piece of foam down with your thumb on the top side of the cricket and use thread wraps to capture it for good and keep it in place. 2 or 3 thread wraps is fine. I like to add a few half hitches in here and there just to save my work, because you can always pull too tightly on this 70 denier thread and don't want things coming undone. After you get it tied in and after you save your work, I like to just trim that foam piece on the back, kind of coming to a point. So I'll just trim it upwards on each side of the foam. Final material is going to just be a little hot spot, because black flies are mostly easy to see, but in certain light conditions can be challenging. So I do like to throw a really bright hot spot. In this case, it's going to be a hot pink. So before I put this Salmo Supreme on top as an indicator, I'm going to add a small dab of liquid super glue where those thread wraps are going to go. So when I tighten down that Salmo Supreme, it's going to be stuck in place for good. And this Salmo Supreme offers really great flash and color variation to reflect light and attract the eye once it hits the water. Do your best to add a whip finish or a couple of half hitches. You might even want to just add a little bit more super glue to your thread and make a few more securing wraps before trimming off your thread. And then you can use a good sharp set of scissors to trim your super floss legs on the front side to length. And then pull them around a little bit to make them splay out and look the way you want them to. I don't know what it is about a cricket pattern, but I've had more luck with these crickets than I have with hoppers and beetles and ants on some fall days. It just pays to have them in your box. They float really well, and fall fishing is here. This is an amazing pattern to use during the autumn months. A friendly reminder, don't fish the reds, and I hope this thing helps you out on your home waters. Head down to your local fly shop and ask for Larva Lace by name. If they don't have it, send them to hagensfish.com for the best high quality fly tying materials on the market. We want every fly shop to carry these materials. We believe in them so much. We catch so many fish on flies tied with Larva Lace materials. We just want to make sure everybody has access to them. So if you're a fly shop and you don't have Larva Lace yet, give us a call. Go on to hagensfish.com and we will get you set up. Dealer pricing is available. Make sure your customers have these materials. Please help us share these videos with your network, like them, subscribe to our channel so you get all of our tutorials, and check us out on Facebook and Instagram. We're just helping to spread the good word about flies that we love and a sport that we love even more. This community is amazing and we really appreciate you being a part of it. Thanks for tying with Larva Lace materials. Here's to tight lines and well-tied flies.